My name is Daniel Seo, Seminarian for the Diocese of Orange. Last year, 2012, I walked the Camino of St. James. What inspired me to walk the Camino? It's a great question. To be honest, I didn't know about the Camino until my dad asked me one day if I wanted to travel to Europe. It wasn't completely out of the blue. I was discerning for the priesthood. So my dad thought it would be a great idea for me to, kind of get out of the OC bubble, discover the real world. And I totally agreed. It's a great idea, Dad, a free trip to Europe. Thank you. I was originally planning on going to Barcelona, and then I found out about this path called the Camino. I thought about the distance. I thought about the whole idea of backpacking alone. I was like, man, that's really cool. And so I thought it would be a perfect way to just get away from all the distractions here back home, especially during my year of discernment. It's interesting that you ask what was the toughest experience. It's funny because it's all comprised within the first day and a half. I planned my trip to go from England to Paris to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, which is the first point where you start the entire Camino. I took a train, a night train. Unfortunately, the train got stuck because there was a malfunction in the engine or something. So my whole trip was delayed 3 hours. Problem is, I had to leave that day because I only had 28 days in my calendar to walk the whole Camino. For the average person, it's scheduled for 33 days. That being said, I got to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port 3 hours later. I initially scheduled everything to the point where if I walked on time, I would arrive at the albergue in Roncesvalles, the next town over, at 8 p.m. The reason why I say that is because the sun sets around 8:45. So when I got to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, there was a young man from Italy who asked me if I planned on leaving that day, and I said I did. And he told me I have to cross the Pyrenees by hiking over the mountain. I was like, why? I mean, I understand, but why can't I just go around? Because there is a fog storm coming in. And he said it was the most beautiful experience he's ever had. In the entire Camino, it being already late, I kind of doubted if I should do it because nobody else that day, at that time, decided to walk. But in my head, I was like, YOLO, YOLO! And so I was like, alright, let's do this, and I start walking. The funny thing is, I was very naive of the harsh conditions. I realized after walking 2/3 of the way up that the visibility just got worse and worse. Next thing I know, I could barely see like 10-15 feet in front of me. So when I arrived towards the top, there was a landmark, a cross. I knelt down and I did a quick prayer there. It was beautiful because my whole first day was so spiritual. And I was in prayer with God the whole time. The problem is when I got to the top, I was following these marks from the France area. And in the France area, the trail isn't well marked. So I was following little markered rocks. Next thing I know, about an hour past the cross, I was surrounded by wild horses. Then I realized I was lost. So I followed my guide and I looked around my landmarks, and what I thought was where I was wasn't. So I just kept trusting my instincts. I walked down the mountain to this extra path. At that point, I haven't seen anyone for about 4 or 5 hours. And then this man comes driving up this hill in this old pickup truck. And that was my sign of hope. I was like, thank you, God. And so I stopped this man and I'm like, hola, ¿cómo estás? And he was like, and I was like, hablas inglés? And he's like, and then I realized he was French. He knew a little bit of Spanish. So with my broken Spanish, I tried to translate to him that I needed to get to the next albergue in Roncesvalles. So I thought he offered me a ride to the next town. He pointed to his trunk and he said he'd give me a lift. So I get in his trunk, sitting next to this wet dog and some manure. But completely grateful and thankful that this man is offering me a ride. So the man drove back up the mountain and took me back to the spot where I saw the cross. He takes me out of the car. He points in the distance and says, "Walk." I'm like, "What? You're crazy." No visibility, the sun is setting, it's raining, and the wind's picking up. We're gonna die. He was like, "You have to do it." And in my head I was like, "Whoa, okay, that's funny, but no, seriously, I can't do that. I'm gonna die." And he was like, "This is your obligation. You have to do it." And then it got serious. I started panicking, and I asked the man if he could save my life. I offered him money. "Could you please just drop me off at the next town?" He says, "One moment." And he gets excited and he walks back into his car, or into his truck. He starts the engine and starts driving off. And as he's driving off, I remember very vividly his face as he turns around. He starts waving goodbye. I sat on a rock, very confused and lost. At that point, I lost my mind, cursing, literally. Like those MTV real world girls, you know, when you see on TV, they're like, "Boop, boop, boop." Actually angry at God. And then I hit a low point, and I thought, this is it. I was so embarrassed. My pride got in the way. How was someone going to see a young, athletic boy dead on his first day on the Camino? So I took out my camera. I made a recording explaining how I died, in case I died. And then I turned on survival mode because I knew I'd die if I stayed at the top of the mountain. I walked an extra 3 hours, and it was literally midnight when I realized I was not going to find the next town. I looked for shelter, but there was literally no shelter. So I had two options. I could either sleep on the left side of the trail, which was pure forest, or I could sleep on the right side, which was all plain. Now the consequences of sleeping in the forest were wild animals and unknown terrain. Sleeping in the plains consisted of less wild animals, but rain and heavy winds. But I didn't want to die getting beaten, so I figured I'd rather die freezing, so I decided to go to the plains. I threw on all my gear, try to get as warm as I can, but that only lasted about 15 minutes because the rain soaked through everything. But that was the longest night of my life. Every 5 minutes felt literally like an hour, and I couldn't sleep. But during that whole time, I reflected on the entire day, and I was able to forgive the man because I thought this was God's way of humbling me. And I kid you not, after I did that, literally about 5 minutes later, it stopped raining. And not only did it stop raining, the clouds parted, and there were stars, like 1 million stars in the sky. And what's better is, after I was like, wow, thanks God, this is amazing. I kid you not, a shooting star. The next morning it was like 4:30, and my hands were numb and my legs were getting numb too, so I decided I need to move. So I got back up the mountain. I walked an extra 25 kilometers. Turns out I walked about 55 kilometers that first and second day. I got to the next town, discovered that from all the walking, I had tendonitis in my shins. So that led to me having to walk with tendonitis for the next week. But yeah, good times. I think it's too hard to pinpoint one specific moment that encapsulates what I consider the most fruitful moment. But I'd say that the entire way from St. John Pied de Port to Santiago Compostela was the fruitful experience. I say that because I came across so many different personalities walking the Camino, and I realized how beautiful humanity is. There is a certain companionship when you're walking the path. You're forced to trust in your fellow pilgrims. Having decided to walk the path alone, they were all I really had. That being said, I learned to, especially after the first day when that man abandoned me, to still have faith and hope in humanity, and to trust that the Lord would guide me through the entire way. So during that time, I met interesting personalities. I met one guy who walked from his house in Cologne, Germany, all the way to where we were. And I met this girl who was a poker dealer on a cruise ship. I also met some priests from the States. I realized everyone's on a different walk of life, and they're all walking the Camino for different reasons. I myself was walking the Camino to understand my vocation. I learned that through walking the path, God was speaking to me through everybody that I walked with, because I realized that these are the people, if I were to become a priest, that I would have to minister to. So that was the most fruitful experience. That understanding and walking the whole path, thanking God for helping me come to this realization. If anything practical, I learned that it's really important that you know yourself. For example, with the 28 days I had, I wanted to walk all the way to Santiago within that short amount of time, and I had two options at one point. I had either A, to walk to Santiago within 24 days and do an extra 4 days to walk a little mini Camino to the Atlantic Ocean, or I could have walked the whole thing and taken my time in 20 days. Everyone was telling me to take my time. I, on the other hand, knew that I could do it, the 24 days. It was the best decision I ever made, because when I got to the Atlantic Ocean, wow, it was beautiful. If I could give you one advice about walking, it's to make sure you keep your whole day in prayer. And I don't mean literally like praying as you're walking, going, Our Father who art in heaven. I mean, you could do the rosary as you're walking too, of course. But I mean, the people you come across, the sleep you do, uncomfortable bed, whatever. Everything you do, keep it in prayer and then be open to the Holy Spirit. And I promise you, the Lord will speak to you in ways that you had no idea. Yeah? Cool. Oh, by the way, I actually have a video documentary on my page if you want to see it. Raj might put it in the link down below. So, yeah, just click on that link and you could actually watch and follow my journey.